Naveena again. I'm just about to read the second part of the first chapter of my book, The New Magic by Naveena Shine, Amazon.com. Okay, so Rindan, oh never mind, I'll just read it. Quickly he scrubbed all traces of grime from his body, cleansing himself in preparation for the coming rites. Donning a fresh white robe, he sat on his bed and waited for the summons with a sense of mounting excitement. When the knock came to the door, Rindan was ready. Rising from the bed, he pulled himself to his full height and took a deep breath. It was time. Opening the door, he bowed to Uthikar and Danyan, who fell in 2 steps behind him. He fell 2 steps behind them. They made their way down the long corridor, into the courtyard, and over to the great central hall that dominated the centre of wizardry. Tall, crenellated towers rose gracefully from each corner, reaching to spired peaks 200 feet from the ground. The arched entrance was tall enough to allow the masts of the sailing ship of Clen to pass beneath, and room to spare. In the courtyard, darkness had fallen, and oil lamps had been placed to shed sunlight on the path. The massive oaken doors were closed tightly, shutting them out. But Rindan knew that the whole brotherhood of wizardry were assembled within, awaiting his entrance. They had come from all corners of the earth to be at Toramathgorn for this day, as everyone was eager to witness the ceremony that was to mark the beginning of the final struggle. Uthikar and Danyan dropped back a little, leaving him alone to open the proceedings with a ritual test of the skill of the young hopeful. Each door weighed at least half a ton, and Rindan was to open them using mind power alone. For any other novice, this arduous task would have taken every ounce of mental strength they possessed. Rindan, however, gave an almost contemptuous chuckle, pointed 2 fingers of his right hand at the latch, and concentrated his energy. Both doors flew open with a loud crash. He smiled with satisfaction as he saw the looks of amazement on the faces of those crowded within. After a short pause, while the company recomposed themselves, he heard the formal challenge from the Master of Ceremonials. "Who is it who seeks entry into the Hall of Wizards?" Rindan replied in the same tone of formality. "It is I, Rindan of the Sign, who would seek entrance to this illustrious company." "By what right do you, Rindan of the Sign, enter into this place?" continued the challenge. "By the right of my power and my calling do I seek initiation into the highest magic of the land." "Enter, Rindan of the Sign, that you may be so empowered." Alone, Rindan walked through the archway and glided slowly up the centre of the building. He looked straight ahead. Knowing that he was being studied and with curiosity by hundreds of eyes flanking the aisles on either side of him, he kept his gait smooth. He recognized the shrunken form of the Lord High Wizard as he sat with dignity on his chair of office, high on the dais. It was rumoured that this man had already lived beyond his allotted 1,000 years. Yet even now That frail body held more power than anyone else living. The eyes that were fixed on him were filled with concern, and Rindon felt a vague feeling of uneasiness as he tried to keep his heart steady through the intensity of the gaze. To the right of the Lord High Wizard sat Lord Galtis, the ancient lawmaster, and on his left was Lord Jaita, who was standing now, staff in hand, ready to conduct the ceremonials. Coming to a halt before the Lord High Wizard, Rindon fell full length on the floor, arms outstretched, as a mark of humility. Jaita stamped his staff 3 times, and his booming voice filled the room as he said, "Rindon of the Sign, you have come before this assembly today in order to be accepted by and gain admittance to the exalted company of wizards. Should you succeed, you will be the wielder of powers such as you have never imagined. Through the power of your mind, you will be able to know the thoughts and control the actions of those weaker than yourself. You will be able to make the elements move to your command and be able to transform matter into the illusion of anything you choose. You will know the secrets of men's hearts and read the events of their lives. Although you will not have dominion over death, you will be able to expand your own lifetime to a span of 1,000 years. Such powers can be dangerous, and their misuse can make you an evil in this world. Therefore, it is required that before you are so invested, you swear a sacred and binding oath. Are you ready thus to swear?" "I am ready," replied Rindon. "Arise now," said Jaita, "and stand before us with your arms raised to the vastness of the skies." Rindon obeyed and fixed his eyes on the high round window directly above the chair of the Lord High Wizard. Through its softly coloured glass he clearly seen the newly rising crescent moon. He repeated the solemn words, "I, Rindon of the Sign, do hereby swear that whatever power I am able to wield will be used solely in the service of good. If I so choose to use my powers for evil, then my body and soul will be banished into the nether world to suffer pain, torment, and misery for all of eternity." As he heard these words coming through his own lips, Rindon was suddenly caught up by the enormity of this oath he was taking. He had heard it said so often that he was destined to vanquish evil. It had never occurred to him that it was also possible that he might be able to choose evil. Not that he ever would, of course. But then he remembered the number of times his despairing teachers had reprimanded him for being disobedient, arguing, for being arrogant. In their eyes, it seemed that these were evil things. There was already evil within him. He had never really considered what exactly good and evil meant. So far, the terms had been vague, grand notions to be used with great dramatic meaning, evoking wonderful flights of emotion. But he had very little practical idea of how they related to the nitty-gritty details of everyday life. He knew others considered his constant desire for power wrong, yet it was so much a part of him that he couldn't imagine living without it. For the first time, Rindon was not sure anymore. Not sure of his fitness for the task. Not sure whether he could accomplish his great destiny. Was he good enough or pure enough? Suppose some evil were to enter him through some sort of weakness within and start turning him bad from the inside. What would be the consequences? He shuddered as he heard the words of the oath ringing in his ears, and he suddenly became aware of Jeta's words. If anyone knows of just cause why this initiation should not proceed, let him speak. There was silence as Lord Jeta's eyes surveyed the ranks of faces on either side of the hall. Moments passed, and then, into the silence, a small voice made itself heard. It was a second or two before Jeta recognized it as coming from Rindon himself. "My Lord High Wizard," came the almost inaudible whisper, "I do not know that I am worthy of such an honor." The Lord High Wizard moved forward in his seat and looked long and deeply into Rindon's eyes. Finally, he smiled gently and said for all to hear, "Rindon, my boy, this is the first sign I have ever had that you are indeed worthy. I must confess that even at this late hour I have been prepared to call off the whole proceedings. You are not ready yet, and I could not allow such power to come into the hands of one with such pride as yours. I would rather face all the perils of the evil Lord Melchior alone than to run the risk of having him enter through your pride and combine his power with yours. I finally see true humility in your eyes, and I know that although there is still great risk, at least now there is real hope. If you are ready, we can proceed." Rindon considered what the Lord High Wizard said and was very confused. What he himself had experienced as a very debilitating feeling, his mentor had seen as his only salvation. Maybe this was not going to be as simple and straightforward as he had supposed. Everyone was waiting for his answer, and with more than a little apprehension showing through his voice, he said, "Yes, I am ready." On a signal from Jeta, the two assistants divested Rindon of his white apprentice robe, and he turned and walked until he reached a point that was in the exact center of the building. It had been so constructed that here the roof rose to its highest peak, with all the lines of force running through the structure, culminating at its apex. Rindon ascended the 6 stairs to the raised platform. He felt the cool, smooth crystal beneath his bare feet. 20 feet above his head was another form made from crystal. It was in the shape of a pyramid, which was suspended from the apex by long chains. Once on the platform, Rindon could immediately feel the soft pulsation passing through his body as the energy flowed from one crystal to the other. This was where a new wizard's potential was tested, and power given and received according to how much that individual was able to take. Already he could hear the murmurs as Jeta began the ritualistic incantation to call up the powers that govern the universe. Gently, he could feel the energies from above and below shift into a new rhythm, as if falling in with the modulations of the voice. Rindon relaxed as he had been instructed and tried to open his body and mind, leaving himself vulnerable to the forces that were flowing through him. At each breath he could feel an increase in vibration, both of sound and movement, until his body seemed to be buzzing in harmony with the surroundings. The other wizards had joined in by now, and had risen with 2 fingers of their right hands extended towards him. They were forming a catalyst for the forces, each with their own individual strength and powers evoked and concentrated. Rindon could feel the changes as the free-flowing energies of the skies were drawn together, pulled through the apex, and were intensely magnified by the crystal pyramid. In his body, they met equally powerful forces that were being drawn up from the center of the earth to focus through the crystal platform upon which he was standing, to join in a silent explosion of power. Rindon felt the molecules of his body loosen as the vibrations continued and increased in intensity. It was a pleasant sensation which massaged every muscle and sinew into a deeper relaxation. As the forces gathered and mingled, he felt them remodeling and reshaping, forging a place for themselves within the framework of his veins and arteries, coursing through and around, filling him with their strength and power. Just as he thought that he had received all he could contain, he heard a gasp from the throats of those around, and felt a surge go through him with the violence of an electric shock. It was as if the forces had just now awakened to the fact that they finally had a real connection between the earth and the sky. Their energies suddenly erupted into a cataclysmic explosion of life. The power thus generated could be perceived by the onlookers as rivers of molten blue flames lighting up the pathways of his blood. They saw it in flashes like lightning encasing him in a circle of blue flame. All thought vanished from Rindon's mind as he was caught up in the molten eruption. It was as if he had become a vast emptiness into which these tremendous elemental forces created their dance. His own energy merged and became one with their great power, and he lost all sense of himself as a separate being. At these moments he was nothing but the merging. He became the deep, dark mystery of the creating of the earth. He was the huge nothingness of the skies that contained everything. He ceased to exist as the smallness of an individual, and melted into one pulsating vibration that was the source of all things. Time and space dissolved into him, and his body writhed and trembled in the cool fire of the transformation. A cry of shock rang out from the assembly, as their chanting became an inhalation of awed amazement. Before their eyes, the impossible was happening. As they watched in spellbound apprehension, the flashes and cracklings subsided, and the blue light took on a new, more subtle intensity. Possessed by the fire, Rinden's body slowly started rising up off the crystal pedestal. It moved slowly until it reached the midpoint between the two energies, exactly in the middle of the two crystals. It was supported above and below by a stream of laser light radiance, and hung suspended, perfectly balanced between the earth and sky. Without volition, Rendon stretched out his arms, embracing the power. With a final surge that turned him almost transparent, the forces abruptly withdrew, dropping his body gently onto the crystal floor, where it lay pulsating with new life.